Her trembling hands caressed the medallion, while the rain mercilessly battered the roof of Red Valley. The silence of absence was deafening. Elena had buried Santiago, but not her pain. In her eyes, a dry desert where promises once bloomed. When that stranger appeared at her door with eyes that kept secrets and hands weathered by the same sun that punished her land, she never imagined that destiny had woven a new dawn for her. Sometimes, the purest water springs from the darkest depths, like the tears that water the garden of new beginnings. If this story of loss and rebirth touches your heart, gift us a like. Each one is like a drop of water for this thirsty land we share. And now, tell me, how do you think this story will end? Your voice is part of the spring that keeps our memory alive. Comment and share the wisdom that only years can give. The sun mercilessly punished the dry valley when Jebediah Cole appeared like a shadow on the horizon. Elena Martinez observed from the porch of the Red Valley Hacienda how that figure approached slowly, with determined steps despite the heat that made the air tremble. Her hands, weathered by work, clung to the wooden doorframe. There was no one else for miles around who could help her. The land stretched arid and cracked as far as the eye could see, as if the sky had forgotten it existed. 3 months of mourning for Santiago, her deceased husband, were reflected in the rigorous black of her dress, a color that absorbed heat as it absorbed her pain, in silence, without respite. When the man arrived in front of her, Elena could see his eyes, the color of earth after a storm. On his belt, the metal of the revolver shone with a threatening gleam. There was something familiar in his features, an echo of the past that she couldn't identify. "Mrs. Martinez," he said in a rough voice, as if each word cost him an immense effort. "I've come for what is mine." A shiver ran down Elena's back. The stranger's words pierced her. Chest like thorns. What could this man want that she could give him? All she had left were 100 hectares of thirsty land and promises buried under the dust. The wind blew between them, dragging dry leaves and whispers of the past. In the distance, a crow cawed like a bad omen. "Please," she finally said, her voice trembling but her gaze firm. "I don't know who you are, but this land is all I have." The man's hand tensed near his weapon, but something in Elena's eyes, a mixture of dignity and desperation, seemed to stop him. For a moment that seemed eternal. Time froze between them. What Elena didn't know was that, from the window of the old barn, a pair of eyes were observing the scene with calculating interest. Carlos Benavente, the town banker, contemplated the hacienda he had coveted for years, patiently waiting for her to give up. "I need water and a place to spend the night," Jebediah finally said, breaking the silence. "Tomorrow we'll talk." Elena nodded slightly, feeling that she had just sealed a pact with destiny. The sun was beginning to hide behind the mountains, dyeing the sky an intense orange, while the shadow of the newcomer projected long and dark over the land that both, for different reasons, considered their own. The morning brought with it the distant song of cicadas and the relentless heat that filtered through the cracks of the house. Elena woke with a start, with the sensation of having slept for just a few minutes. Her dreams had been populated with confused images: Santiago smiling next to the dry well, the land cracking beneath her feet, and those storm-colored eyes that now belonged to the man who slept in the stable. She got up and dressed mechanically, as she had done every day since Santiago's death. The mirror returned the image of a young woman with eyes too old, marked by a sadness she had come to accept as a permanent companion. The aroma of freshly made coffee surprised her upon reaching the kitchen. There he was, Jebediah, with the sleeves of his shirt rolled up, stoking the fire in the stove as if he had known the house forever. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, without looking at her, focused on his task. "I hope you don't mind. Coffee was always my weakness." Elena remained silent, observing him. There was something in his movements, in the way his hands treated each object in the kitchen, that awakened in her a disturbing curiosity. It wasn't the first time a man had tried to take away the little she had, but it was the first time one had prepared coffee before doing so. "Who are you, really?" she finally asked, accepting the cup he offered her. Jebediah looked out the window at the dry fields before answering. The valley stretched like an ochre blanket under the early light, beautiful despite its desolation. "Let's say I have as much right to be here as you do," he finally responded. "Santiago Martinez was my half-brother." The cup trembled in Elena's hands, spilling a few drops of coffee on the embroidered tablecloth. one of the few beautiful things left in the house. A dark stain spread slowly across the fabric, like a secret impossible to contain. Santiago never mentioned having a brother, she said, regaining her composure. There are many things Santiago never mentioned, he replied, and his words seemed to weigh like stones in the air between them. Outside, the thin cattle mooed weakly in search of non-existent pastures. The drought had turned the drinking troughs into cracked mud bowls, and the future of Red Valley hung by a thread as thin as Elena's patience. "I need help with the cattle," she finally said, breaking the silence. "If what you say is true, if you really were Santiago's brother, then you'll know that this land needs hands to work it." A shadow of a smile crossed Jebediah's face, revealing for an instant a different man from the one who had appeared on the horizon the day before. "I know this land better than you imagine, Mrs. Martinez." And so, with no more agreements than that brief exchange of words, they began to work together under the relentless sun. From the nearby hill, Carlos Benavente's binoculars followed their every move, calculating how much longer that woman could resist before selling what he considered the last obstacle to his plans. The weeks slipped by like slow drops in suspended time. Jebediah had settled in the small room annexed to the barn, and each morning, before dawn, Elena would find him already working. His hands seemed to know the land in a way that she, despite living there for years, had never achieved. October brought with it the Harvest Festival in Drytown, a tradition that was maintained despite the years of drought, like a ritual that no one dared to abandon for fear that hope would also wither. Elena hesitated to attend. Since Santiago's death, whispers had followed her like elongated shadows. "You should go," Jebediah told her the previous afternoon, as they repaired the North Corral fence together. "People talk, but they'll talk more if you don't show up." Eleanor drove the hammer forcefully into a plank, releasing part of the frustration growing inside her. "What does it matter what they say? They've already judged me in all possible ways." Jebediah looked at her with that intensity that seemed to penetrate her, as if he could see beyond the armor she had built around her heart. "Sometimes, Mrs. Martinez, what's important is not what others see, but what one decides to show." That night, as she brushed her hair in front of the cracked mirror in her room, Jebediah's words resonated in her mind. What image did she want to project? That of the defeated widow, or of the woman who refused to surrender to adversity? The pale blue dress, kept for months at the bottom of the wardrobe, seemed almost an act of rebellion when she put it on. It wasn't black, it wasn't mourning, it was the color of the sky after the storm, the color she imagined water would have if it ever ran abundantly through Red Valley again. When she descended the stairs, Jebediah was waiting for her by the cart, with clean clothes and damp hair, as if he too had decided that night deserved an effort. His eyes lingered on her a second longer than necessary, and Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the awareness of being seen, truly seen. The town hall glowed with oil lamps and paper garlands. The violin music floated among conversations, but when Elena entered on Jebediah's arm, an uncomfortable silence spread like a stain, eyes fixed on her blue dress, on the man accompanying her. Dr. Simon Morales, newly arrived from the capital, was the first to approach. With a warm smile that contrasted with the coldness of the atmosphere, he offered them 2 glasses of lemonade. "Mrs. Martinez, what a joy to see you here tonight," he said sincerely, "and I see you don't come alone." Elena introduced Jebediah as a distant relative who was helping her with the hacienda. The lie or half-truth left her lips with a naturalness that surprised her. The doctor nodded, but his intelligent eyes seemed to understand more than she was saying. In a corner of the hall, Carlos Benavente observed them with a furrowed brow. His plan to acquire Red Valley was complicated by the presence of that stranger. He approached with determined steps, his impeccable suit contrasting with the simplicity of most attendees. "Elena, dear," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a surprise to see you here, and with company. Won't you introduce us?" There was something in the way Benavente looked at Jebediah, a mixture of recognition and wariness that made Eleanor tense. "Jebediah Cole," he introduced himself, extending a hand that the banker shook with evident reluctance. "I'm helping Mrs. Martinez with Red Valley." "Cole?" repeated Benavente, as if savoring the surname. "I don't remember any Cole in these lands." "There are many things you don't." "Remember, Mr. Benavente," Jebediah replied with a calmness that contrasted with the tension emanating from him. The music resumed, saving them from continuing that conversation loaded with subtexts. As couples formed for the dance, Elena remained by the wall observing. Dr. Morales approached again. "Your friend seems to know Benavente well," he commented quietly. "They've barely met today for the first time," she replied, although a doubt settled in her mind. "Sometimes, first times are just reunions we don't remember," said the doctor with an enigmatic smile. "Be careful, Mrs. Martinez. This land holds more secrets than it seems." Upon returning to Red Valley, under a sky dotted with stars, Eleanor surprised herself observing Jebediah with new eyes. Who was this man really? What secrets did he share with Santiago's past? And, more disturbing still, why was his presence beginning to feel as necessary to her as the water the land yearned for? The routine in Red Valley had acquired its own rhythm, as if time was now measured in shared tasks and comfortable silences that stretched between Elena and Jebediah. November brought with it cold winds that blew from the mountains, dragging dry leaves and promises of a winter that announced itself as harsh as the drought that preceded it. One afternoon, while Jebediah repaired the roof damaged by the last gale, Elena ventured into Santiago's office, a room that had remained closed since his death. Dust danced in the rays of light that filtered through the half-open curtains, like small ghosts suspended in time. Her fingers traveled over the surface of the oak desk, a silent witness to so many nights when Santiago had locked himself in there, fighting against numbers that never added up enough. The upper drawer was locked, but Elena knew where to look for the key, in the medallion that Santiago always wore around his neck and that now rested in the jewel box next to her bed. The inside of the drawer revealed meticulously ordered papers, invoices, cattle sale contracts, letters from creditors. Underneath it all, a yellowing envelope caught her attention. It had no sender or recipient, just a date written in Santiago's unmistakable calligraphy. March 12, 1882, 3 years before he and Elena met. With trembling hands, she extracted the contents. A rudimentary map of Red Valley and a letter. The words, written in a different handwriting than Santiago's, seemed to jump off the page. "My dear son, when you read this, I will probably be gone. I have kept this secret for too long, waiting for the right moment to reveal it, but life rarely grants us the perfect moments we anticipate. Under the old oak, where the stream used to run in my father's time, there is something more valuable than gold, an underground spring. Your grandfather sealed it when the dispute with the Benaventes began, fearing they would try to claim our lands if they discovered its existence. Your father, Geronimo Martinez." Elena dropped the letter on the desk, her mind working frantically. A hidden spring. Why had Santiago never mentioned it to her? And what dispute with the Benaventes? Questions swirled in her head like dry leaves in the yard. The creaking of a board in the hallway startled her. Jebediah was standing in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the corridor light. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? "The roof is fixed," he said, as if he hadn't noticed the agitation on Eleanor's face. "It won't withstand another strong storm, but it will hold until we get new wood." Elena nodded mechanically, folding the letter with precise movements before keeping it in her skirt pocket. Some truths needed time to be shared, even with those we were beginning to trust. "Thank you," she finally replied. "There's coffee in the kitchen. It will do you good with this cold." He nodded and withdrew, but Eleanor was certain that his eyes had caught the trembling in her hands, the agitated breathing, the papers scattered on the desk. Jebediah Cole saw more than he said, and this disturbed her as much as it attracted her. That night, as the full moon bathed Red Valley with its silver light, Eleanor contemplated from her window the old oak tree mentioned in the letter. It was there, solitary in the middle of the sterile land, like an old man who had stayed to tell a story that no one wanted to hear. The words resonated in her mind as her eyes closed, overcome by fatigue. In her dreams, water ran. Again through Red Valley, and next to the reborn stream, 2 figures observed. One was Santiago, smiling as in the early days. The other, with his back to her, had the broad shoulders and unmistakable bearing of Jebediah Cole. December arrived with an unexpected cold that froze the drinking troughs and covered the few remaining pastures with frost. Elena woke each morning with aching bones and a determination that grew like a stubborn seed in hostile soil. The letter and the map had not left her. Thoughts but something stopped her each time she considered sharing the discovery with Jebediah. One morning, while preparing breakfast, she heard horses' hooves approaching. Through the kitchen window, she saw Carlos Benavente dismounting in front of the house, accompanied by two men she didn't recognize. His presence, as always, brought with it a sensation of barely disguised threat. "Eleanor, my dear Eleanor," the banker greeted as he entered, removing his hat with a gesture that pretended to be gallant. "This cold is brutal, isn't it? Especially for a woman alone." She tensed at the insinuation. Benavente looked around, searching for signs of Jebediah's presence, who had departed at dawn toward the town in search of provisions. "I'm not alone, Mr. Benavente, as you well know," she responded firmly. "And I have work to do, so if you could tell me the reason for your visit." The man smiled, a smile that never reached his eyes, always so direct. "It's one of the things I admire about you, Elena." He sat down without waiting for an invitation. "I've come to make you an offer, a very generous one. The drought gives no respite, and winter will be harsh. I offer to buy Red Valley for double its current value." Elena placed the coffee pot on the table with more force than necessary, and the dark liquid splashed the wooden surface. "Red Valley is not for sale. It never has been." Benavente sighed, as if he were talking to a stubborn child. "Elena, be reasonable. This land is killing you slowly. What would Santiago think if he saw you like this, clinging to a dead dream?" The mention of Santiago was like a slap. Elena felt the blood boiling in her veins. "Santiago trusted this land more than any man, especially more than you, Mr. Benavente." The banker got up slowly, his face hardening. "Think about it, Elena. My offer won't last forever. And when hunger tightens, when the cold is unbearable, remember that you had a way out." After his departure, Elena remained, motionless in the middle of the kitchen, trembling not from cold but from rage. Benavente's words had touched a sensitive fiber, awakening doubts she thought overcome. Was she really honoring Santiago's memory? Or was she just clinging to Red Valley out of fear of the unknown? When Jebediah returned at dusk, he found her in the office, surrounded by old papers, with the map spread on the desk and eyes reddened from reading in the fading light. "Benavente was here," she said without preamble. Jebediah left the provisions on a chair and approached the desk, his face an impenetrable mask. What did he want? The same as always, to buy Red Valley. A heavy silence settled between them. Finally, Elena took the letter and handed it to Jebediah. "I found this among Santiago's things. I think you should read it." As he read, Elena studied his face, looking for some indication of surprise, some sign that this information was new to him. But Jebediah Cole seemed carved in stone, his eyes moving methodically across the lines of the paper. "Did you know?" she asked when he finished reading. "Did you know about the spring?" Jebediah carefully folded the letter before answering. "Not exactly. I knew there was water, but not where to find it." Elena stood up, confronting him with a mixture of frustration and hope. "And why didn't you say anything? Why let Red Valley die of thirst if you knew it could be saved?" "Because it's not that simple, Elena," he responded, using her first name. For the first time, which surprised her as much as his words. "Some secrets are buried for a reason. What reason could justify watching everything Santiago loved die?" Her voice broke as she pronounced these words. Jebediah approached the window, contemplating the nocturnal landscape before responding. "The same reason I came, a promise." He turned to her, and for the first time since his arrival, Elena saw vulnerability in his eyes. "The night before he died, Santiago wrote to me. He asked me to come to Red Valley, to protect you. From Benavente, from the truth, even from myself." Elena felt the ground moving beneath her feet. The pieces began to fit. Jebediah's familiarity with the hacienda, the tension with Benavente, the secrets. "Who are you really, Jebediah Cole?" He held her gaze, as if in that moment he decided how far he would allow her to see into his soul. "I am the son of Geronimo Martinez with Maria Cole, the woman for whom he abandoned his legal wife. I am Santiago's older brother, the one who was sent away to avoid scandal." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And I came to fulfill my brother's last wish, to protect you and protect Red Valley, whatever it takes." The revelation fell between them like a stone in deep waters, generating waves that expanded in all directions. Elena approached the mirror that hung on the wall of the office, searching in her own reflection for some indication of the woman she had been before, the one who trusted, the one who didn't question. But she only found this new Elena, with questions in her eyes and determination in her tense jaw. "Tomorrow," she finally said. "Tomorrow we'll look for the spring." Dawn found them next to the old oak, with shovels, picks, and determination etched on their faces. The ground was hard, punished by drought and now by cold, but each stroke of the shovel was an act of faith, a declaration of war against despair. They worked in silence for hours, their breaths forming. Small clouds in the cold air. Elena's hands, not accustomed to this type of labor, soon filled with blisters that burst and bled, but she continued, driven by a force that was born from the depths of her being. "You should rest," said Jebediah when the sun reached its zenith. "Your hands." "My hands will heal," she responded, without stopping. "Red Valley won't have that luck if we give up now." The hole became deeper and deeper, and with each layer of earth they removed, Elena felt that she was also excavating within herself, unearthing parts of herself she thought lost, her tenacity, her courage, her ability to hope against all hope. It was at dusk when Jebediah's shovel hit something that wasn't earth. A metallic sound resonated in the still air. They looked at each other, momentarily forgetting their fatigue. With renewed vigor, they cleaned the area until they discovered what appeared to be a small, rusty iron hatch. It's real," whispered Elena, almost breathless. Jebediah nodded, his face illuminated by a glow that didn't come only from the setting sun. Geronimo wasn't lying. The old fox really did it. The hatch was sealed with a mechanism that required a specific key. Elena remembered the words from the letter. "The key that opens this door to life is where it has always been, in the very heart of Red Valley." "The heart of Red Valley," she murmured, thoughtful. What would that mean to Geronimo? Jebediah stood up, cleaning the sweat and dirt from his face with the back of his hand. "For my father, Red Valley wasn't just lands and cattle, it was family, it was home." Something clicked in Elena's mind. She brought her hand to her neck and extracted a small key that hung from a silver chain, a wedding gift from Santiago that she never took off. Santiago told me that this key belonged to his mother, that it was the key to the family's heart. With trembling hands, she inserted the key into the lock of the hatch. It fit perfectly. A turn, a click, and the mechanism yielded. Jebediah helped her lift the heavy lid, revealing a perfectly constructed stone well. The sound of water, faint but unmistakable, ascended from the darkness like a fulfilled promise. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks, mixing with the sweat and dirt. "Water," she said simply, and in that word was everything. Life, hope, future. Jebediah sought her gaze, and for the first time since his arrival, Elena saw a genuine smile illuminate his weathered face. Without thinking, she extended her bloodied hand and took his, equally injured by the work. Their fingers intertwined over the edge of the well, sealing a silent pact. "Santiago was right about you," he said quietly. "You're stronger than you think." In the distance, the sun was hiding behind the mountains, dyeing the sky red and gold. A new day was approaching for Red Valley, a day with water. What neither of them noticed was the figure moving away on horseback toward the town, having witnessed everything from the safety of the nearby hill. Carlos Benavente now knew what he was looking for and was willing to do anything to get it. The news of the discovery of the spring spread through Dry Town like fire in a field of dry wheat. In less than a week, Elena and Jebediah had built a rudimentary system to extract the water and store it, and the first signs of recovery were already noticeable in the lands near the well. One bright January morning, while Elena was hanging freshly washed, clothes with water from the spring, a luxury she could now afford, she saw Dr. Morales approaching on his horse. His visit, unexpected but not unpleasant, brought news from town. "Everyone is talking about the miracle of Red Valley," he said, after accepting a glass of fresh lemonade on the porch. "Some say it's God's work, others that it was pure luck." Eleanor smiled, observing Jebediah, who worked in the distance, building a channel to bring water to the more distant fields. "It was persistence, doctor, and perhaps a bit of divine justice." The physician studied her with attentive eyes before continuing. "Benavente is furious. He's been meeting with important people from the county, including Judge Mendez. I fear he's looking for some legal way to claim the spring. Eleanor's smile vanished. Of course Benavente wouldn't give up so easily. What could he do? The water is on my property, on land that has belonged to the Martinez family for generations. The doctor lowered his voice, although there was no one else who could hear them. There are rumors, Elena. Rumors about old debts, lost documents. Benavente is stirring up the past, looking for something he can use against you. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool breeze. Thank you for warning me, Doctor. We will be prepared. As the physician was leaving, he stopped for a moment and turned to her. There's something else, Elena. The Spring Festival will be in 3 weeks. As a council member, I would like to formally invite you and your companion. It would be a good opportunity for people to see what you've accomplished in Red Valley, to change the narrative. Elena nodded slowly, understanding the doctor's strategy. Public opinion could be her best defense against Benavente's machinations. We'll be there, Doctor, thank you. That night, after dinner, Elena shared with Jebediah the conversation with the doctor. They were sitting in front of the fireplace, the fire projecting, dancing shadows on the walls of the living room. The house, once cold and silent, now seemed more alive, as if the water from the spring had awakened not only the land, but also the walls that sheltered them. Benavente won't stop, said Jebediah pensively, looking at the flames. I know men like him. Money and power are only part of what he seeks. What he really wants is for everyone to bow to his will. Elena observed his profile outlined against the firelight. In these months, she had learned to read the small signs on his face, the tension in his jaw when he was worried, the soft crease next to his eyes when something amused him. Now she saw both things, a contradiction that intrigued her. What amuses you in this situation? She asked. Jebediah looked at her, surprised that she could read him so well. That Benavente thinks he's dealing with a defenseless widow and a hired laborer. He has no idea who he's really facing. There was a force in his words that warmed Elena more than the fire. For months she had fought alone, carrying the weight of Red Valley on her shoulders. Now that weight was shared, and the burden seemed not only lighter but also more significant. The Spring Festival, she said, changing the subject slightly. We'll have to prepare. The last time I attended a social event was the harvest dance, he completed. You wore a blue dress that matched the sky at sunset. Elena looked at him, surprised not so much by his observation, but by the way he expressed it almost poetically. I didn't know you paid attention to such things. Jebediah looked back at the fire, as if in the flames he could find the right words. I pay attention to everything that matters to me, Elena. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken meanings, with feelings that grew between them like the first plants in the newly watered fields of Red Valley. Tentative, but persistent. I wonder, she began, but stopped, unsure of how to continue. What do you wonder? He encouraged her. I wonder what Santiago would think of all this, of us working together, fighting for his land. She paused, gathering courage, of the way things are changing between us. Jebediah stood up and approached the window. Outside, the moon illuminated the fields that were beginning to show signs of life. Santiago knew me better than anyone in the world, he finally said. He knew I would do anything to protect what he loved. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the fire and something deeper. But he also knew that I am a man of my word. I promised him that I would protect you, Elena. I can't offer you more than that without betraying his memory. The words fell between them like stones in a pond, creating waves that reached places Elena didn't know existed within her. What was she really asking? What did she expect from this man who had come into her life like a storm and was now as essential as the water they had found? Sometimes, she said softly, protecting means more than keeping someone safe. Sometimes it means allowing them to live fully, even if that involves risks. The tension between them was palpable, a rope stretched to the maximum that could break or become something new, something stronger. The crackling of the fire was the only sound for a long time, until Jebediah finally nodded, as if reaching a decision. The Spring Festival, then, he said, returning to the initial topic as one seeking safe ground. We'll show Drytown what Red Valley can be. Elena accepted the change in conversation, recognizing that some seeds need time to germinate. Spring was approaching, and with it, new possibilities for the land and for them. February brought with it an unexpected snowfall, the first in many years according to the town elders. Red Valley awoke covered by a white blanket, that transformed the landscape, softening its contours, temporarily hiding the scars of the drought. Elena woke up with the strange luminosity that filtered through the curtains. Looking out the window, the vision left her breathless. Everything was transformed, unrecognizable, and yet familiar, in a way she couldn't explain. It was as if Red Valley had decided to show her a new facet of itself, one it had kept secret. She descended the stairs wrapped in a shawl, following the aroma of freshly made coffee. She found Jebediah in the kitchen, looking out the window with an expression that mixed amazement and nostalgia. "Good morning," she said, and her voice seemed especially soft in the silence that the snow had brought with it. He turned, and for a moment, Eleanor saw something in his eyes that made her hold her breath. A vulnerability, a longing that he usually kept hidden under layers of reserve. "The last time I saw it snow like this was when I was a child," he said, offering her a cup of coffee. "My mother used to say that snow was the way the sky reminded us that even the darkest things can become luminous." Elena took the cup, letting the heat filter through the ceramic to her cold hands. "Your mother seems to have been a wise woman." She was. A fleeting smile crossed his face. She would have been proud to see Red Valley today. She always believed in second chances. They shared breakfast in a comfortable silence, observing how the first rays of sun made the snow shine as if it were covered with tiny diamonds. There was something magical about that moment, a pause in time that seemed to isolate them from the outside world and its concerns. "We should check on the cattle," Eleanor finally said, breaking the spell. "This cold could be dangerous for the calves born in autumn." Jebediah nodded, but before they could get up, a knock on the door startled them. Visits were rare in Red Valley, especially with this weather. Upon opening, they found young Tomas, the shopkeeper's son from the town, with cheeks reddened by the cold and agitated breathing. "Mrs. Martinez," he said between gasps, "my father sent me. Dr. Morales has had an accident on the way to the Mendoza hacienda. His horse slipped on the ice and fell down a bank. They've taken him to his office, but he needs urgent help." Elena looked at Jebediah, concern reflected in both faces. Dr. Morales was one of the few allies they had in town. "I'll go," said Jebediah immediately. "I know some remedies that could be useful until help arrives from the city." "I'm going with you," Elena replied, already heading to find her coat. "Tomas, you can stay here until the storm subsides." The journey to town was slow and dangerous. The snow, beautiful from the safety of the house, became a treacherous obstacle on the road. The horse advanced cautiously, its hooves seeking firm support points under the white layer. When they finally arrived at the doctor's office, they found a small group of people gathered outside. Among them was Carlos Benavente, who gave them a calculating look that contrasted with his concerned tone. "Elena, what courage to come in this weather. The good doctor will be grateful." She ignored his comment and made her way inside. The small room that served as an office was warm thanks to a wood stove. On an improvised stretcher lay Dr. Morales, with a pale face and a leg provisionally bandaged. "Eleanor," he whispered upon seeing her, trying to sit up without success. "You shouldn't have come in this weather. And you shouldn't have gone out on horseback in the middle of a snowfall, doctor," she replied, approaching to examine his condition. "How serious is it?" "The leg is broken, that's for sure, and I have some bruised ribs. Nothing that can't heal with time and rest, but—" His gaze darkened. "I won't be able to attend the municipal council tomorrow, and Benavente will take advantage of my absence to push his proposal on water rights." Jebediah, who had been silently examining the doctor's leg, looked up. "What proposal?" The doctor looked toward the door to make sure they were alone before answering. "He wants all water sources discovered in the last 6 months to be considered communal property, under the administration of the town hall, which he controls, of course." Eleanor felt the ground moving beneath her feet. It was an astute strategy. Instead of directly attacking her property over Red Valley, Benavente was going after the water, the real treasure. "But he can't do that," she protested. "The spring is on my property. It has been there for generations." "Technically, he can try," replied the doctor. "In times of scarcity, there are legal precedents, and he has the judge on his side." Jebediah finished adjusting the bandage on the leg with precise movements that revealed experience. "Who can take your place on the council, doctor?" he asked. The physician looked at him with surprise. "No one. As representative of the Eastern District, only I or my designated substitute could—" He stopped, understanding. "But it would have to be someone respected, someone with—" Knowledge of local affairs. Someone like Mrs. Martinez, completed Jebediah, looking at Elena. The doctor considered the idea, stroking his chin thoughtfully. It could work. Elena is a property owner, a taxpayer, and, since the discovery of the spring, a figure with growing influence. Yes, I could designate you as my substitute for this session. Elena looked at them alternately, surprised by the turn of events. But I've never participated in politics. I wouldn't know what to say, how to argue. You don't need to be a politician, said Jebediah firmly. You just need to be who you are. A woman who has fought for her land, who has found water where others only saw dust, who has given hope to Red Valley when everyone gave it up for lost. There was so much conviction in his words that Elena felt a wave of warmth within her, melting the fear like spring melts snow. Dr. Morales took a paper from his desk and, with a trembling hand, drafted a letter designating Elena as his temporary representative on the council. As he signed it, he looked at both with a grave expression. Benavente has powerful allies, but he also has enemies. Seek Judge Hernandez before the meeting. He's the only one who can stand up to Mendez, and he knew Geronimo Martinez well. Upon leaving the office, the snow had begun to melt, forming small streams that ran down the street. The sky had partially cleared, revealing glimpses of blue. Jebediah took the reins of the horse, but before they mounted, Elena stopped him, placing a hand on his arm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Why risk so much for Red Valley? Is it just because of the promise to Santiago?" He looked at her for a long time before answering, his eyes reflecting the sky that was opening above them. "It's been a long time since it was just for Santiago," he finally said. "Red Valley is part of me, as it is of you. And you—" He stopped, as if the following words were too dangerous to be pronounced. Instead of finishing the phrase, he gently took Elena's hand and brought it to his lips, a gesture as unexpected as it was revealing. "Let's go home," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow, a battle awaits us." As they rode back to Red Valley, Elena noticed something extraordinary. Small violet flowers peeking through the melting snow, as if the earth itself was announcing that, after the harshest winter, the promise of spring always comes. The municipal council chamber of Dry Town was overflowing with people that morning. Never before had a simple administrative meeting aroused so much interest, but the rumor that Elena Martinez would take Dr. Morales' place had spread like wildfire, attracting the curious and those with interests in the water issue. Elena felt out of place in her best dress, a navy blue suit that had belonged to her mother and that she had hastily adapted the night before. The 5 permanent members of the council observed her from their elevated seats. Mayor Rodrigo Fuentes, an affable but weak man, Judge Mendez, Benavente's unconditional ally, Mrs. Peralta, the school principal, old Jimenez, representative of the cattle ranchers, and Judge Hernandez, whom they had managed to speak with briefly before the session. Carlos Benavente occupied a preferential seat in the first row, flanked by his 2 usual assistants. His confident smile revealed that he expected no real opposition to his plans. Jebediah sat discreetly in the back of the room, but his presence was an anchor for Elena, a reminder that she was not alone in this battle. Mayor Fuentes struck with his gavel, beginning the session. First item of the day, Mr. Benavente's proposal on the communal administration of water sources discovered in the last 6 months. Mr. Benavente, you have the floor. The banker rose with the ease of someone accustomed to dominating any room in which he finds himself. Distinguished council members, esteemed neighbors, we live in extraordinary times. After years of drought, the sky has blessed us with water, but not in an equitable manner. His gaze stopped significantly on Elena. While some properties now enjoy abundance, others continue to suffer. My proposal is simple. All recently discovered water sources should be considered a communal resource, administered by this honorable council for the benefit of all citizens of Dry Town. Murmurs of approval traveled through the room. The proposal sounded reasonable, even generous, if one didn't know the true intentions behind it. "Mrs. Martinez," said the mayor, "as temporary representative of the Eastern District and affected party, you have the right to respond." Elena stood up, feeling all eyes on her. For a moment, fear threatened to paralyze her voice, but then she saw Jebediah nodding slightly, silently transmitting his confidence. "Honorable Council, neighbors of Dry Town," she began, her voice firmer than she expected. "Mr. Benavente speaks of equity, but forgets to mention the history behind the spring of Red Valley. It wasn't a gift from heaven that fell casually on my property. It was the result of hard work, of faith in a land that everyone had abandoned, and of a family secret that the Martinez family protected for generations." She paused, observing how her words were received. Some faces showed skepticism, others curiosity. "My late husband, Santiago Martinez, came from a family that loved this land more than money or power. His father, Geronimo, sealed the spring during the Great Territorial Dispute of 1870 to protect it from those who wanted to snatch their home." Her gaze rested directly on Benavente, from the same ones who now, with different methods but equal intentions, try to appropriate what has never belonged to them. Judge Mendez leaned forward with evident annoyance. "Mrs. Martinez, those are serious accusations without legal basis. The past is not relevant to this discussion." "On the contrary, Your Honor," intervened Judge Hernandez, speaking for the first time. "The past is precisely what gives context to our present, and if we speak of legal foundations, I allow myself to remind the Council that the Water Law of 1865, never repealed, clearly establishes that underground springs are indisputable property of the owner of the land where they are found." Benavente stood up, his facade of calm beginning to crack. "That law is archaic, and did not contemplate emergency situations like the current drought." "Drought?" Elena couldn't contain a smile. "Mr. Benavente, if Red Valley has found water, it's because we've worked for it. Where was your concern for equity when my husband died, leaving me a property that everyone, including you, considered worthless? Where was your communal spirit when my neighbors turned their backs on me, following your instructions not to help me?" A murmur traveled through the room. Elena had touched a sensitive point, exposing the hypocrisy that many perceived, but few dared to mention. Mrs. Peralta, who until then had remained silent, spoke with her measured but firm voice. "I have a question for Mrs. Martinez. If the Council respects your right over the spring, what guarantees would we have that the water will benefit more people than just the residents of Red Valley?" It was a fair question, and Eleanor had anticipated it. She took a document from her bag that she had prepared the night before, with Jebediah's help. "I bring an alternative proposal. Red Valley offers to allocate a third of the water from the spring for communal use, specifically for the school, the hospital, and the small farmers of the Northern Valley who have suffered most from the drought." She handed the document to the mayor. "In exchange, we request that the Council formally recognize our right over the spring and provide us with the necessary materials to build an efficient distribution system." Old Jimenez, who had been observing everything with narrowed eyes, let out a laugh. That resonated in the room. "Now that's an honest proposal at last. The girl offers to share what legitimately belongs to her, while others want to appropriate what they never worked for. I vote in favor of Mrs. Martinez's proposal." The tension in the room was palpable. Benavente, with his face reddened by barely contained anger, tried one last strategy. "And who guarantees that this woman will keep her word? Who ensures that this is not another manipulation by her companion, that supposed brother of Santiago who appeared conveniently after his death?" Eleanor felt the blood boiling at the insinuation, but before she could respond, a voice rose from the back of the room. "I guarantee it." All eyes turned to Jebediah, who had stood up. With firm steps, he approached the stand. "My name is Jebediah Cole Martinez, legitimate son of Geronimo Martinez and Maria Cole." He took a yellow document from his pocket and handed it to Judge Hernandez. "This is my birth certificate, and here is my father's will where he recognizes his two sons, Santiago and me." The judge examined the documents carefully, while absolute silence reigned in the room. "The documents seem perfectly in order, Your Honor," he finally declared, "and they coincide with the historical records of the county." Benavente's lawyer, seeing how his case was crumbling, tried a new strategy. "Even if we accepted the validity of those documents, there remains the fact that Geronimo Martinez abandoned Red Valley for years. According to the land law of 1875, a property abandoned for more than 5 years can be claimed by—" "Geronimo Martinez never abandoned Red Valley," interrupted Elena, standing up next to Jebediah. "And we have proof of that too." From her bag, she extracted Isabel's diary and several letters they had found in the trunk. This is the personal diary of Isabel Martinez, Geronimo's wife. It documents each day of her life in Red Valley, including the periods when her husband traveled on. Business but always returned. The letters confirm his continuous presence and his intention to maintain the family property at all costs. Judge Mendez, visibly uncomfortable, took the diary and skimmed through it superficially. Personal diaries hardly constitute legal evidence, Mrs. Martinez. Perhaps not by themselves, intervened Judge Hernandez, but combined with the tax records I've brought, where it's recorded that the Martinez family religiously paid their contributions for Red Valley every year from 1858 to the present, they constitute solid proof of continuous occupation and ownership. Benavente, who had remained strangely silent, finally stood up. His face showed barely contained fury. All of this is irrelevant, he spat. Those lands were stolen from my family. I have witnesses who can corroborate it. Witnesses of events that occurred 65 years ago, Mr. Benavente, asked Jebediah with an incredulous tone. That would be truly extraordinary. The room burst into contained laughter. Benavente, humiliated, looked around as if seeking support, but only found faces that oscillated between amusement and contempt. It was then that Jebediah played his definitive card. Your Honor, if there's still any doubt about the legitimacy of our property over Red Valley, I would like to present the original deed, signed by the governor in 1858, granting these lands to Juan Martinez for services rendered during the war. The metal tube passed from hand to hand, until it reached Judge Mendez, who extracted the document with trembling hands. Even he, with all his partiality toward Benavente, couldn't ignore the forcefulness of this evidence. It seems authentic, he finally admitted. It is, confirmed Judge Hernandez. It has been verified by the state historian whose report I have here. There is no possible doubt about its legitimacy. Benavente, seeing his imminent defeat, resorted to his last resource, the threat. This doesn't end here, he exclaimed, accusingly pointing at Elena and Jebediah. Red Valley is cursed. It always has been. No Martinez has prospered on that land, and neither will you. Judge Mendez struck with his gavel, calling for order. Mr. Benavente, control yourself, or I'll have to remove you from the room. But Benavente seemed to have lost all control. Ask why Santiago Martinez died so young. Ask why Geronimo never found peace. That land consumes those who possess it. A murmur of consternation traveled through the room. Dr. Morales stood up, his clear voice cutting through the growing chaos. As the physician who attended Santiago Martinez in his last days, I can testify that he died of typhoid fever, a disease that affected several residents of the county that year. There was nothing supernatural about his death, just a medical tragedy that, with current advances, would probably have been treatable. His words, pronounced with the authority of science, returned calm to the room. Benavente, defeated on all fronts, collapsed into his seat, suddenly aged. Judge Mendez, after briefly consulting with his colleague Hernandez, cleared his throat before pronouncing his verdict. In light of the evidence presented, this court declares that the property known as Red Valley legitimately belongs to the heirs of Santiago Martinez, specifically to his widow, Elena Martinez, and to his brother, Jebediah Cole Martinez. Mr. Benavente's lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety. The session is adjourned. The strike of the gavel resonated like a thunder of justice in the room. Spontaneous applause erupted among the attendees, many of whom approached to congratulate Elena and Jebediah. Benavente left the courthouse without looking back, a solitary and defeated figure who was lost among the streets of the town. His power, based on fear and manipulation, had vanished before the force of truth and determination. That night, back in Red Valley, Elena and Jebediah celebrated their victory. With a simple dinner on the porch, contemplating the fields that now, without any doubt, belonged to them. Do you think Benavente will try something else? Asked Elena, serving him a cup of coffee. Jebediah shook his head. His reputation is destroyed. The central bank will send auditors, and if what we suspect about his methods is true, he'll soon have more serious problems than Red Valley. Elena nodded, feeling how a weight she had carried for so long finally lifted from her shoulders. It's strange, she said after a moment. For months I've dreamed of this day, of definitively defeating Benavente. Now that it has come, I almost feel, I don't know, As if something were ending, Jebediah took her hand on the table, intertwining his fingers with hers. "It's not an ending, Elena, it's a beginning. For the first time since I arrived at Red Valley, I feel that we can look forward without the past chasing us." She smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. For too long, both had lived trapped in stories that others had written for them. Elena as the widow who should preserve her husband's legacy, Jebediah as the brother who fulfilled a last promise. Now, finally, they could write their own story. "What do you want to do now?" she asked. "What do you desire for Red Valley, for us?" Jebediah contemplated the fields illuminated by the moon before responding. "I want to see this land flourish as never before. I want to plant trees that will give shade to children not yet born. I want to build something that endures, not out of obligation or promise, but by choice." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "And I want to do it with you, if you desire it too." Elena felt her heart expanding with a happiness that almost hurt. She had spent so much time surviving that she had almost forgotten what it really felt like to live, to desire, to dream. "I desire it," she responded simply, and in those two words lay an entire future. The night enveloped Red Valley with its starry mantle, while two people who had found home in each other contemplated the land that, after so much struggle, they could finally call their own without reservations or fears. A year had passed since the hearing that finally freed Red Valley from Benevente's threats. Autumn again tinted the fields golden, but this time the harvest had been abundant, and the barns were overflowing with grain and hay for the winter. Carlos Benavente had left Drytown shortly. After his legal defeat, it was rumored that he had departed for Mexico, fleeing from bank auditors who discovered irregularities in his accounts. His bank had been acquired by a larger entity from the capital, and his name was rarely mentioned anymore in the town's conversations. Red Valley had flourished under Eleanor and Jebediah's care. The channel system had expanded, bringing water to every corner of the property. New stables housed a growing herd of horses, and the old barn had been restored to its original splendor. But the most significant change was in the back of the house, where Eleanor had decided to recreate the garden that Isabel Martinez had described with so much love in her diary. Roses, lavender, sunflowers, and aromatic herbs grew in orderly harmony, creating an oasis of color and fragrance that contrasted beautifully with the austerity of the surrounding landscape. It was in this garden where Elena found herself that October afternoon, cutting wilted roses and collecting the last herbs before the first frost. Her belly, slightly bulging under the apron, announced the new life growing inside her, a promise of future that had arrived when they no longer expected it. Jebediah observed her from a distance, finishing repairing a fence before the sun set. He liked to see her like this, absorbed in a task she enjoyed, with her hair carelessly gathered and dirt stains on her cheeks. For him, she had never been more beautiful than in these moments of absolute concentration, when she seemed to merge with the land they both loved. He approached silently, not wanting to interrupt her work, but she felt his presence and looked up. A smile illuminated her face, one of those smiles that were born from the deepest part, and that Jebediah still found surprising, as if each one were an unexpected gift. "I've finished with the south fence," he said, sitting on the small wooden bench next to the rosebush. "It will withstand the winter without problems." Eleanor nodded, cleaning her hands on the apron before sitting beside him. "Dr. Morales will come tomorrow for the monthly checkup," she commented, unconsciously passing a hand over her belly. "He says everything is going perfectly, but he insists on his monthly visits. I think he enjoys your stories as much as my pregnancy." Jebediah smiled, remembering the long conversations with the physician who had become a close friend and the unofficial chronicler of Red Valley's transformation. "He's a good man, one of the few who believed in us from the beginning." The silence that followed was one of those comfortable silences that can only exist between two people who have learned to communicate beyond words. The sun was beginning to hide behind the mountains, painting the sky with strokes of orange and purple. The shadows lengthened over the garden, transforming the flowers into mysterious silhouettes. "Sometimes I wonder," Elena finally said, "what Isabel would think of all this, of what we've done with Red Valley, of the garden, of us." Jebediah considered the question, looking toward the horizon where the first star was beginning to shine timidly. "I think she would be proud," he responded softly, "not just for the recovered land or for the water that runs again, but because there is finally peace here. The divisions that caused so much pain have healed." Eleanor nodded, understanding. For generations, Red Valley had been the scene of secrets and separations. Geronimo divided. Between two families, Isabel and Maria united by shared pain. Santiago and Jebediah connected by blood, but separated by circumstances. Now, finally, the broken pieces had joined in a new whole, imperfect but beautiful in its integrity. "I've been thinking about names," she said, slightly changing the subject. "If it's a girl, I'd like to call her Isabel Maria." Jebediah's eyes moistened, surprising Elena, who had rarely seen him so moved. "It's perfect," he murmured, taking her hand. The two women who, despite everything, found a way not to be enemies but allies, who built bridges where others would have raised walls. "And if it's a boy," she continued with a knowing smile, "Santiago Geronimo." Jebediah looked at her with infinite tenderness, recognizing in that gesture the generosity that had captivated him from the beginning. Elena wasn't seeking to erase the past, but to honor it, to integrate it into their present and their future. "You'll be a wonderful mother," he said. And it wasn't a compliment, but a deep certainty. "You have Isabel's strength and my mother's compassion." Eleanor rested her head on Jebediah's shoulder, feeling a peace that went beyond words. The garden around them seemed to vibrate with its own life, as if the flowers were listening to their conversation and approving it with their silent presence. In the distance, the sound of a train whistled. The railroad had finally arrived in Drytown the previous month, connecting the once isolated valley with the rest of the world. With it had come new settlers, merchants, fresh ideas. The town grew, gradually transforming into a small city with a future. "We should go in," suggested Jebediah, when the first stars already populated the sky. "The cold is rising." But Elena didn't want to move yet. There was something about that moment, about that precise instant, suspended between day and night, that she wanted to treasure a little longer. "Just one more minute," she asked, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the last rays of sun were saying goodbye. "I want to remember exactly how Red Valley looks tonight." Jebediah nodded, understanding. There were moments in life that deserved to be kept intact in memory, like photographs of the soul that no camera could capture. From their position in Isabel's garden, they could see the full extent of Red Valley, the golden fields, the irrigation channels gleaming like silver threads under the twilight light, the cattle slowly returning to the stables, the first lights coming on in the houses of the workers they had built near the spring. All of it formed a landscape that spoke not only of material prosperity, but of something deeper, a land that had found its balance, its purpose, like themselves. "It's curious," reflected Elena, her voice barely a whisper. "When you arrived that day, I thought you came to take away the little I had left. I never imagined that you were actually bringing everything I was missing." Jebediah looked at her, also remembering that first encounter. Elena on the porch with her black dress and her eyes full of a mixture of fear and determination. How much she had changed since then. How much they both had changed. "And I thought I was coming to fulfill a promise," he responded. "I didn't know that I was actually coming to find my home." They finally got up, when the stars were already shining intensely in the dark sky. The path to the house was illuminated by small oil lamps that Jebediah had installed along the trail, creating a path of light in the growing darkness. Upon reaching the porch, Elena stopped for a moment, looking back toward the garden that was now barely visible in the twilight. The fragrances of lavender and rosemary floated in the night air, mixing with the aroma of moist earth and the promise of dew. "Thank you, Isabel," she murmured, so low that not even Jebediah could hear her. "For the diary, for the spring, for your son, for everything." And although it might have been just a trick of the twilight light or of her imagination, Eleanor thought she saw for an instant the figure of a woman among the rose bushes, smiling with approval before vanishing into the night. Inside the house, the dining room lamp projected a cozy circle of golden light. The table was set for two, with the simple elegance that now characterized Red Valley. On the wall, a portrait of Santiago observed the scene with serene eyes, not as a ghost claiming the past, but as a benevolent guardian who blessed the present. As they sat down to dinner, as they had done every night for months, Elena thought about the strange paths that destiny takes, about how the most painful stories can, with time and enough love, transform into the foundations of something new and beautiful, about how water, even when it seems to have disappeared, always finds a way to return to the surface if one has the patience to look for it. And she thought above all about how two people marked by losses and secrets had managed to find each other through time and pain, as if all previous generations had been just preparation for this moment, for this union that finally healed the wounds of the past. Outside, Red Valley slept under the starry mantle, breathing with the peace of one who has finally found its purpose, and inside, in the house that had witnessed so much pain and now overflowed with hope, Elena and Jebediah shared the bread and wine of their new life, the life they had chosen together, the life that was about to multiply with the arrival of a new Martinez. The story had completed a circle, and at the same time, it was just beginning.